Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel, and my fellow XRP community members, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and this may be my very last video because I've been informed that the end of Ripple and XRP is near. Oh my god, what are we going to do? What about my heavy XRP bags? How will I get through this? We're talking about the XRP killer. You guys, some of you have heard about this, right? RTGS, Real-Time Gross Settlement Global. RTGS Global. No, obviously, it's better to be obvious, right? Like, I'm not being serious when I say that. This is not a quote-unquote killer of Ripple and or XRP. Not in the least. It is something to pay attention to, and I will explain what I mean by that. I have a number of things to say on this topic, but to get everybody caught up to speed, as the markets were tanking yesterday, XRP was down. People were trying to find something to blame it, and oh my god, look at this news coming out on the same day from Forbes. I think this is what really got things going yesterday. Forbes put this out. Real-time cross-border payment innovator could cut trillions from global financial friction. Oh my god, they're talking about cross-border payments, getting rid of Nostro accounts, all this stuff. It's a bunch of jibber-jabber. Well, some of it is. And so people were pinning the price going down on this. Never mind you that stocks were down, gold was down, the entire crypto asset class was down, but this had to be it right here. It was RTGS, which, by the way, has been around for like over a year. I don't remember exactly when it was first announced, but they weren't on my radar, and I'll admit that. But this piece just happened to have come up from Forbes yesterday, right? So what are they doing? They're ultimately claiming that they're going to solve the train wreck that is the world of global cross-border payments. And a lot of it sounds like what Ripple is doing. And to be honest and fair, a lot of it is what Ripple's doing. So anyway, before I explain in any further detail, if you would please delicately tap that like button. And if you are super duper afraid that this may be the end of Ripple and XRP, go ahead and subscribe to the Moon Lambo channel. I will assuage you of your fears, girl. All right, let's go ahead and hop in. You know, I'm going to jump in. There's actually just one part of this piece I want to cover, and then I just want to tell you what I've researched, because I'll even say one more thing at the outset before I read a sentence from this. The way that I was approaching this, after reading a bunch of people's fears, my Twitter feed was blowing up. Everybody was asking me to make a video about this, and thinking, I'm happy. I saw so much in the YouTube comment section and on Twitter. I was like, yes, I'm making a video on this. All right. But the way that I approached this was, and I take it seriously. So the way that, like, my default position on anything in life is skeptic. Like, I'm not going to come right out and say, no, this is not true, or this or that. I mean, unless I know that definitively. It's more like, okay, I don't know, let me learn more. But I'm always going to default to being a skeptic, and for good reason, as you shall see here. But I approached this the same way I approached things when I was learning about Swift versus what Ripple is doing in late 2017, which is when I joined the world of crypto and the XRP community. I was a blank slate. I didn't want to believe anything other than whatever the truth happened to be. And so I asked as many questions as I could. I threw every terrible potential scenario I could mentally think of at what Ripple was doing with what was then known as XCurrent and XRapid. Now it's known as RippleNet and on-demand liquidity. I threw every mental hurdle I could at it, and I kept, in researching, I kept finding that there was nothing that was something that would make the project unfeasible big picture. I was just throwing everything at it, and I was like, no, this is totally viable. And so I was doing the same thing here. Is there anything that RTGS is doing that would make it so that Ripple is going to have some serious competition, make it so that XRP is not needed, anything along those lines? So that's where I was approaching this from. And I've spent now like just hours and hours and hours looking into it, and also spending, like, part of this should always be logically thinking through on your own. I did a fair bit of that, I will tell you that, just thinking through it to figure out what makes rational, logical sense. After, learning, both sides of the argument, right? So here's the part that first jumped out at me, and I read this whole thing, but check this out. RTGS, which, here we go, uses patent-pending technology to identify and freeze assets at the sending and receiving bank, and then authorize the transaction, which takes place in 50 microseconds. My gosh, damn, that's impressive. That ain't even a full second, son. How you doing that? As the company explains in its announcement, quote, through its patent-pending liquidity lock and block system, RTGS Global locks available liquidity at 2 counterparty banks before sending a liquidity block message to complete the transaction. This whole process can take just 50 milliseconds to complete, enabling real-time bilateral settlement of funds. The result is RTGS Global, an international system that transforms the challenges of legacy correspondent banking and international banking. Settlements and counterparty credit risk become non-existent. There's no need to pre-fund a Nostro account, and 24/7, 365 availability drastically improves the end customer experience, dramatically improving commercial cash flows. So I already feel like I'm being sold a timeshare, just to be super clear. Because here's what they stated, and this should jump out here right away. They have their patent pending liquidity lock, which it just locks up the available liquidity, right? Okay, that should be self-evident in what that does. It's ensuring for both parties that the liquidity is available, so nobody's going to get screwed. So I was like, okay, so there has to be liquidity, which means that it has to be funded from somewhere, which means that this has nothing to do with utilizing a cryptocurrency, which it does not. It's not utilizing blockchain, and so they are not really taking away the Nostro problem. But then they wrote down here that there's no longer a requirement for the pre-funding of Nostro accounts, which I knew immediately to my core without researching further it could not be true, or at a minimum is misleading for some reason that I had to look into further to discover, which I did ultimately. It's absolutely misleading. It's like sleight of hand, essentially. Because it's not the case that banks have to fund accounts all over the world. Rather, what you're talking about is central pools of liquidity. And we'll see, like, this sounds like so pie in the sky. If they can pull it off, kudos to them. But even then, it's going to be a walled garden situation. So it's not, I don't think that they're going to have, to be clear, if they pull this off, and this isn't like a bunch of jibber jabber, if they actually have some stuff lined up and this isn't purely, a marketing piece, like they're not purely hoping that you take the bait and buy the timeshare. If it's not just that, they could, if they have an actual system in place that is anywhere near what they're presenting, they could get some traction with it, but it's still not the ultimate solution. It would be like a stopgap before we have enough liquidity for something like on-demand liquidity via RippleNet to take over here. And so when they're talking about this, I was just like, no, this does not make any sense. So rather than the small banks having to have, and really, actually, I should go back just a little bit. It typically isn't the small banks that have Nostro accounts the world over. It's mostly large banks, maybe some mid-sized banks, but small banks, which are most banks, frankly, they don't have the capital to have dormant the world over, so they're already not pre-funding, right? They're not. What they're doing is they're paying larger bank competitors to tap into to that liquidity, the existing liquidity just sitting dormant in banks in case it's needed, and they charge their smaller competitors, the small banks, quite a fee. So yes, indeed, the small banks, I know it sounds bass-ackwards, but the small banks are paying their larger competitors for the privilege to serve their customers and convert from one fiat currency to another around the globe, right? Lots of friction, very costly, dormant capital, not so good. So it's already not the small banks that are doing this. So who's going to be doing this? Well, in this Fantasyland thing, which, okay, fine, maybe that's too far, but it just sounds a bit hard to believe. Allegedly, they've got a couple central banks that are going to be working together, providing the liquidity for reasons, because they haven't really, unless, admittedly, fine, I do want to be fair. I'm being comically critical. That's what I'm going for here, because to be perfectly honest with you, because I haven't seen evidence of this. They're claiming that there are a couple central banks. I personally have not seen anything that would state, lead me to believe firmly that it's in place, for sure it's happening. Maybe there's some sort of talks. I don't know what it could possibly look like, but you're talking about central banks actually leaving their dormant capital. So why would they be willing to do that, and how is that going to reduce cost? And in terms of speed, even if it's marginally faster than what RippleNet and on-demand liquidity have to offer, I'm skeptical for a number of reasons, which I'm going to dive in. But first, I got to tell you, let me share with you this too. The first reason that I knew that Ripple was a better option than RTGS was when I saw this page. This is their official website, and you can see on the right side here, this is their logo. And that is nowhere near as cool as Ripple's fidget spinner. So right there, I was like, the case is already closed. I'll keep looking into this, get the rest of the details. But I already knew fidget spinner wins over whatever the hell these little triangle-shaped things are. So I think it's already an open shut case, but I will dive in further for you. So here's some tweets that I want to share with you. There was some interesting insight from XRP community member Galgatron, and then I tweeted a thread with him, and in his thread I responded, and then he responded also. So I do want to share all this with you because it is fun to think through all of this stuff and just figure out what makes sense. And so, like, to me, this is some of the most fun stuff that you can do, is just analytically think through what's happening, and with anything pertaining to Ripple and the XRP ecosystem. So here's what Galgatron wrote: RTGS is the same concept as Xcurrent and Swift's GPI. It will not be able to compete with on-demand liquidity by sheer virtue that on-demand liquidity eliminates any Nostro. And yes, RTGS uses Nostro, even if the RTGS customer banks are not supplying it. Exactly. And so the Nostro, like the holdings, so they're saying that the banks don't have to pre-fund. This is where the sleight of hand comes in. To me, it's disingenuous to say that because you know what it's leading people to believe. There's no longer the funding. And so the associated cost with this and all the trust issues, that's all gone. I don't think so. I haven't seen evidence of that. You're centralizing where the liquidity is going to be. And I still don't know why a central bank would be interested in having like trillions of dollars of additional dormant capital. That still sounds super duper weird to me. And nobody has explained to me, and I haven't read anything that would make that seem logical. I haven't heard it from RTGS. They just say, here it is, and reasons. Oh, okay, gotcha, reasons. Oh, cool. Right, don't think so. All right, now if it is legit, again, that's cool. I just want the reasons. That's all I'm saying here. And so that's why I'd say, even if they don't want to call it Nostro accounts, it's the same damn thing. You're talking about dormant capital, plain and simple. So again, the only solution for that humans have devised to get rid of the dormant capital, make it not necessary, is to tap into liquidity existing for other reasons. For instance, humans speculated on XRP, which can then be utilized to facilitate settlement for cross-border transactions. Well, how about that? People are already doing it anyway. Why not just take advantage of it rather than have trillions and trillions of dollars locked up? So they are not fixing that problem. Just want to be super duper clear on that. And so I think I want to jump into the next tab now. Here we go. Okay, so, and then Galgatron tweeted this out, and this is where I jumped in. So Galgatron wrote, RTGS uses an inverted Nostro/Vostro mechanism. It's not pre-funded, it's post-funded, but still results in the target bank's funds being tied up in the foreign RTGS account of the sending bank and remains exposed to FX volatility while it sits there. Yeah, it's definitely still exposed to FX volatility. I should pick his brain as far as what he means by post-funded versus pre-funded. I don't know, because I can tell you the way that I'm looking at it, it seems very clear to me that the central banks, they're the ones doing the pre-funding. So like from my perspective, it would still make sense to pre-fund it. So I would just need some clarity for him on why he preferred to use that word. To me, I would still use, without any additional information as to why it makes more sense to call it post-funded. At this point, I would just say it's central banks pre-funding still. They just still are. And so that's just me being curious there. And I wrote the following. The Forbes article on this was interesting. They talked about their patented liquidity lock technology, then stated that there's no need to pre-fund a Nostro account, so the liquidity is sourced from where? It's stated they're using synthetic central bank money. Now, that sounds like some hyperbolic nonsense. Like, what is synthetic central bank money? Is that an existing term, or is that something that this guy pulled out of his rear end? I don't. Maybe it's a real thing. Okay, I'm not familiar with the term, and admittedly, I don't have a financial background. I'm just sharing with you my everyday Joe Schmo opinion here. That one was a new one to me, and I've been in the world of crypto researching what Ripple was doing for years. I've not seen that term synthetic central bank money. But it just sounds like money that the government has printed and is just being held. And there you go, liquidity magically, right? And then I wrote, so if we're to believe that central banks will be the future pools of the liquidity for the entire world, how the heck could that work? That doesn't address existing trust issues. And would it not be extremely expensive? Why would any central bank offer free liquidity? Well, it's not going to be free. Can you imagine? Why would they take this on? It just doesn't make any sense. And then I wrote, and I've got more to say, but let me share with you what I wrote also. I thought most of the Nostro accounts the world over today were being held by large banks, with smaller banks paying larger competitors to tap into that liquidity. So why would a central bank be interested in taking on that role? I have to be missing something. Right? And so again, it clearly doesn't make any sense to this point. If there's a rational reason, cool, and I will accept it if somebody presents a rational reason. I still, after spinning out, I cannot imagine what that would be. These are the same types of questions that entered my mind when I was trying to figure out if Ripple's general plan for removing the need for Nostro accounts thanks to XRP, when I was trying to figure out if that made sense years ago, these are the same types of questions, and so I'm asking it again. It's just a different entity. And we have this, whether it's the FedNow program or what JP Morgan's doing, or Visa Business Direct, like all of these XRP Ripple killers, quote unquote, keep coming out, and none of them are trying to remove the need for pre-funding. None of them. Okay? The only entity that is seeking to do that I'm aware of is Ripple. That's it. There is no other one. And then I wrote, my initial reaction was the same as yours, Galgatron, in that it sounded like a messaging system like RippleNet, not on-demand liquidity, or Swift GPI. The public information I've found does not explain the RTGS global liquidity solution in detail, but funds must be sourced from somewhere. And Galgatron responded with, I agree. I think it's just an overlay for the existing correspondent banking system, and they're dressing it up as something else to draw attention to it. Right. And so here's the thing. As far as what they're doing, and they claim to have, I think they said 44,000 banks, which is interesting. I don't know exactly where that number comes from, because Swift says they have 11,000. They got like the lion's share of the banks on the planet. Okay, but that's the number that they had. Whatever. It's just another question mark there to have clarified by them, I suppose, here. But here's the interesting thing. I'm not saying that there's no merit to their system. So a number of things on this, really. I'm going to try and not forget. I'm just going to keep my stream of consciousness going here. Here's the reason that this would be better than Swift GPI. So we already know, hopefully I don't have to go through this because I don't want the video to go too long. I'm just going to make the assumption that we understand, as XRP community members, the way that the Swift legacy system works in terms of sourcing liquidity via Nostro accounts. So I'm just going to make that assumption. And so what you're doing here is, if you have a system and if it works exactly as they're describing here, and if all the liquidity is always set with a couple central bank entities, super duper, but it's still a closed network because that's two central banks out of how many in the world? Depending on who you ask, there are anywhere from almost 200 countries on the planet to a little over 200 countries, because not every country recognizes every country, so you get, well, there could be different numbers on that. But how many central banks? They cited two. So in terms of interoperability, you already don't have it. But for the closed system where it would be allegedly in place, it does sound like it would be lightning fast, potentially still really expensive, but it could be indeed lightning fast, maybe even faster than RippleNet, including on-demand liquidity. But does that functionally matter? So let's talk about the speed side. I don't think the speed side is going to matter functionally, if it's cheaper. If going through RippleNet via on-demand, including on-demand liquidity, is the cheaper whole solution, whether you're talking about XRP settling in 3 to 5 seconds or you're talking about RTGS in 50 milliseconds, are you going to care if you're the customer and it takes 5 seconds to settle instead of 50 milliseconds? If it's cheaper, are you going to wait those extra 5 seconds? You tell me. Now, it could be longer, admittedly, because there could be local rails that are clunkier. It depends on what part of the world you're talking about. Local rails are different all over the place. So what if it adds an extra few minutes? If it's cheaper, it's still effectively real time. You're talking about a matter of minutes versus a few seconds. I'm just telling you, if Ripple's solution is genuinely cheaper, and I don't know how it couldn't be, because you're removing the cost of the dormant capital, and you're talking about transactions with XRP specifically that are fractions of a penny, I'd be shocked if you could actually have a system that is less expensive. Now, I'd be willing to look at if they think that their business model is actually going to be monetarily more advantageous, super duper. Willing to hear what they have to say. There's no evidence of that to this point, though. And so again, it's a closed system. It's probably, if I had to guess, and it is admittedly just a guess, I bet it's going to be more expensive. But in the meantime, you can remove the necessity for trillions of Nostro. Now, how is that? Because you're still talking about the same daily flows of roughly $5 trillion. Well, if it's faster, you don't need as much of it. You think about that. If it's faster, you get those. You get final settlement in a split second. Bam. Your liquidity is back where it needs to be, right? It doesn't matter. So that actually could absolutely, if it functions as I say, and if they have a large enough reach, it could remove the need for trillions in Nostro. It still would not be functionally superior to removing the need for pre-funding, which, again, to be clear, they absolutely have not done to this point. So to me, no, they have not quite cracked the nut. But here's the thing. With Ripple, and this is a key point here too, and we just need to acknowledge this as XRP holders, like, it is true that adoption for what they're going for is going to take a long time in terms of building out the on-demand liquidity corridors. Now, why is that? Well, and I've been citing this, it's just coincidentally, for a good bit in recent days, in fact, just citing, guys, Ripple does not have as much power to build out liquidity of XRP as much as people would like to believe or do believe. Because the bottom line is that XRP, in terms of a few things, price, volume, and liquidity, it's ultimately following what's happening with Bitcoin, as is every other altcoin. That is the primary driver, is where Bitcoin goes. And if you have a sufficient blend of price and liquidity, that allows you to make these transactions, right? And so if it's the case that you're talking about an asset class in crypto that is a little over 300 billion as I record this, sorry guys, it's just not there. And there's no magic, no sorcery that Ripple can perform in just like the snap of a finger to make it all be there. It's going to take time. So as a result, in the short term, RTGS, if their system really works and it is in place and it is as advertised, they really do have all these partnerships, they can find a lot of success in the short term. But in the long term, it's not going to be the final solution, because they still are not addressing the problem of Nostro accounts. I mean, they don't call it Nostro now. Sleight of hand, my friends. They have not solved the problem of pre-funding. They haven't solved the problem of interoperability, and they haven't solved the problem of trust. So is it a XRP and Ripple killer? No. No, it's not. Is it serious competition? Yeah. Could it make it harder for Ripple to gain market share? Yes. If they get a big foothold, could it slow down the adoption of RippleNet and on-demand liquidity even further? Sure. But to what degree? I don't know. I'm not saying that as fear stuff. I'm just acknowledging reality. Yeah, if they get traction, they get traction. Just like GPI could like slow down Ripple a little bit because there's still not sufficient liquidity. So people that are already on board with Ripple, they have a slightly better system with Swift GPI, and it's no longer unidirectional messaging. Okay, I could see that. And that's what they're doing. They're just trying to hang on for dear life because their system's just completely antiquated. But they still don't have a problem. Swift does not have a solution, rather, for on-demand Nostro accounts, and RTGS doesn't. Nobody does. The only company on the planet that does is Ripple. And it requires the usage of a decentralized cryptocurrency with an open market value. Problem is right now, like I said, there's not sufficient liquidity. And that's why you're seeing these corridors get built out in what is not a fast enough time frame for some very impatient people there. Let me jump into another one now. Here's a tweet. Yeah, I think I already called that. Well, I'll just read this. Dakota Shipley had tagged me along with some others, so shout out to you, Dakota. It's asking for thoughts on this whole thing, and I wrote, it sounds similar to Swift GPI, except the liquidity could come from central banks instead of private/public banks. Still requires funds to be liquid, and I don't see how this eliminates trust and control issues the world over. Their marketing makes it sound baller, though. Yeah, it sure does. So impressive. My gosh. I will buy your timeshare. No, I will not. No, I will not. I should probably wrap it up there. I think that's really is the gist of what I had to say about this stuff, and I don't want the video to go on too long. It's already going on longer next. Oh wait, no, I do have to share this if you can. If you want to look at your screen, this is funny. Crypto Eddie, my fellow XRP YouTuber, wrote best comment of the day, and this was from her YouTube comment section. It looks like, and somebody commented, so now the banks need RTGS account as well as funding Nostro. Yep. I like that. And then somebody named XRP Dude responded with this image of David Schwartz, Ripple CTO, co-creator of the XRP Ledger, which says, I've never heard of RTGS. It'll probably run on RippleNet. And obviously it won't, but it's funny. It's funny. RippleNet will rule the world. So what do you think? There's so much more to say, but this is my first video where I've even talked about this, and it's already going on too long. We could talk about this probably for hours and hours, but I think this is a good starting point. There will be more to say in the future. What do you guys think about this? Did I nail it? Did I take the concept to the wood chipper? And I don't pretend to know everything, so anything that you guys learned that you want to share, please drop comments below. But that's it for this one. I'm not a financial advisor. Do not buy or sell anything, because if anything I say or write, that would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo!